Hey. So, hey everyone, I'm Phil. I am a product designer on fulfillment. I still haven't gotten around to meeting everyone on the call yet, so I'm gradually working my way through. Um, and I wanted to go through a slightly small UI issue. The first issue I actually picked up in GitLab, um, and it's to do with a cancellation modal. And there were some kind of interesting findings that came out around the value of iteration that we kind of push in GitLab versus the value that we're actually getting from designing certain features. So I'm gonna go through a few points on that. Let me just I'm getting some move this out of the way. So the current experience was this. It is a standard modal that appears when a user tries to cancel their subscription on GitLab. It tells them they're about to cancel. It asks them for a bit more information so they can select one of these multi-select options here. For example, why they're not continuing their subscription. They can also add some content. We've also got at the bottom an option to opt into a conversation for a callback, and then we've got buttons that let us keep the subscription or cancel. And then the problem here was that there's been a bunch of support queries that arose about concerns that customers are actually cancelling their subscriptions via the portal, but they're still after the fact getting QSR notifications and invoices saying, oh, you're still going to be charged for this after the fact you're cancelling. So that was the initial ask for this modal, was we need to convey this information upfront to the user to stop these support calls and let them know what they're actually doing. So with initial iterations, I kind of started to jump in and think, okay, let's use some of the existing patterns we have here in our design components library. I worked with a content writer as well as Emily Cybrand with some copy, um, and I landed on this, which is just upfront a simple banner that says if you cancel, you're going to lose these access to the features by this date, and you may incur charges and overages. Um, and that was kind of the initial kind of jumping off point is, okay, this is kind of an MVP. It somewhat fixes the problem that we're trying to solve, but it's really starting to, if you kind of take a step back from what this screen should be doing, it's getting really, really complex, really content heavy. Um, and then and again, there's a few iterations on that of how we should display the warning message, and a few tweaks and things like that as I spend a bit of time modifying that. And then from there, I don't know if Christy's on the call, but Christy mentioned this post by Sid a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or something. And I started looking at that, and there was some interesting things that really, I think, applied to that problem I was trying to solve with the modal. And the first was the very first point, which was reducing quality as a shortcut. So you can't reduce quality to minimize the scope of an iteration. Your iteration needs to meet the same quality standards as you would expect for any work. And I found that interesting. It was tying into exactly what I was doing here. And I was sort of solving for what the ask was in the proposal, but I wasn't really adding any value and making the experience better. And again, to point five in this post by Sid says, the shortcut of shipping something of no value. Don't confuse iteration with making progress. So again, this banner was an iteration. It may solve a certain problem, but it's not really, in my opinion, making progress for the user, and the value isn't really there. So we're kind of presented with a new problem then. So after this initial iteration, we've added the functionality. We've let the users know what's happening here, but we've added more functionality at the expense of a better experience, and the modal is starting to become really complex, really content heavy. Um, so I started to think about how we can actually add value based off those points. The top section, I feel it's important. We're adding this new feature. We need to let the users know. I started looking at this kind of middle section that was probably 60, 70% of the screen real estate on this modal. Um, and thinking about how we can actually reduce the complexity. And my instinct initially is just to get rid of it completely and maybe just ask the users a simple question or a drop down or a single line, why are you cancelling? But I needed to validate that hypothesis with a few stakeholders. And I started to get some insights which are in the issues linked. There's some good stuff in there. So Jeff said he's a senior director, and he said he'd prefer a single select option, so the customer selects their primary, even if there's multiple reasons. So we know the main reason. That makes a lot of sense, really, because somebody could be really cancelling because the price is too high, but they could end up selecting here price is too high, and then they may just select one or two other options as well. And we're not really finding out the real reason why they're cancelling. So it says otherwise it makes reporting pretty tough, and we spend time guessing how much each of the multi-select items contributed. See, exactly that. So whether it's 80% or it's 50-50, depending on how it's split. And Kazim as well said having a single reason is definitely easier to manage. It makes the user select the most important factor, and it's more in line with how sales thinks about it. So it's actually really useful for sales to be able to follow up on that individual reason why someone might be cancelling their subscription. And then also trying to get some of the actual insights of how people are actually selecting. That was an important factor. And this all came out in the issue. So as you can see, nearly everyone, 97.8% of the users who actually do cancel are all giving one reason anyway. So there's likely only going to be one reason they're selecting this. As you can see, we've got 268 cancellations. We've got only 6 people who've selected 2 reasons. And that was enough for me to think we could probably start moving towards a single selector or a single drop down to redesign this. There was also some insights from Valerie around the unboxing element. There was just a huge amount of, even in the new and existing, there was a huge amount of containers and boxes within a relatively simple task. All you want to do is cancel. So from the initial design here, even to my very first iteration, you could see we've got kind of containers within containers, different banners, different kind of boxes. And really, they're just trying to cancel their account, and it almost looks like, it's almost getting to the stage, it's like a full screen cancellation screen type experience. And that's where I found it very, very insightful, because using those kind of initial ask of just creating that banner kind of spun into 2 separate issues around designing a new way to communicate this banner message to the user, as well as actually adding that value. So actually taking a pause and thinking about what the best experience was to deliver to users. And from there, I started to kind of iterate on that design and start to kind of pull out anything that wasn't needed. And it's made the experience a lot simpler. So now we've got this updated modal that strips out all the unnecessary elements that were there. All the unboxing stuff is done, and it makes the content much easier to read. And another really important element is that the single dropdown not only makes the experience tighter, but it's actually giving us this better data in future. So we'll actually get the primary reason why someone does want to cancel. And like I said, we moved this into 2 issues. So we've got the modal redesign issue, and then we've got this second issue, which also includes the cancellation modal. And even that, with a bit extra content, sits way nicer, I think, within the modal design. It's still a lot more legible. And like we said, the unboxing elements really does free up a lot of the UI, and it makes the content a lot more easy to read. So yeah, just a quick overview. The lessons learned were not to confuse the iteration with progress, actually taking a step back sometimes to look at what the scope is, and not to reduce the quality there. I think the data lessons are still TBD. So actually, interestingly enough, the MR, the UX review, came in to me this morning. So this is built. So it should be going live fairly soon. And I think any subsequent data that comes from that would be interesting to know in terms of how users are reacting to the new drop down, and the options and things like that. Um, but yeah, that's a quick overview of this design. So thanks. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Nothing in the agenda, but if anyone wants to make any comments, I have a couple actually, Philip. I thought in particular two. One about when you started referencing Sid's blog post article and your point about value, and how, yeah, you could be um, uh, putting up the alert and answering these things that are part of the issue, right? But they're not. I think you said progress in particular. They're not actually progressing. They're not making progress. You're not adding value anymore. You're just solving the original issue. I loved that sort of sense of pushing it forward every single time. It also sort of keeps the spirit of that blog article, which is value. Um, and then the other one was when you showed the screenshot for unboxing in reference to Valerie's feedback. Yeah, I love how it wasn't literally lines that you were making, like relating to unboxing. It's like
Right.
so often when we look at a screen, we say, okay, there's a line here, we can remove that for unboxing. There's a line. It's sections of content that you're actually referencing, like between 3 and 4. There's no line there, but they are two different sections. And sort of taking that holistic look at unboxing, like due to content, sections of comment. I love that, and I think it overall ended up in a great place. So those are
Yeah.
comments.
Thanks, Blair. And yeah, I think as this was my first issue to pick up, I think I probably wouldn't have pushed it forward as much if it wasn't for Valerie and Jackie. I think they were very keen on, let's actually deliver something that's actually valuable, and it's not just reskinning something that we think isn't really working as is, and that's only going to add complexity. So I think it was a good experience to do it that way.
I had the next question. I really love like the options you give users here, especially with like just the text box. So just like tell us anything. You might have covered this, apologies if so, but what are you going to do with all those insights? Like, how are you going to take those forward? For example, 30% of people are saying, I've decided to use free. Like, what are you going to do with those insights there?
Yeah, I think first of all it's just to track, I suppose, what's coming in. So, for example, like we were saying before, we can't, with the way it is currently, we can't wait. Like the importance of which ones they're selecting if they are selecting multiples. But I suppose it's just taking it in, and actually, if there's any trends regarding, okay, look, everyone who's canceling here is saying it's because of X. That's something we need to work with the research team and figure out. Something needs to be done around solving why so many people are canceling for this certain reason.
And I think that like I'm open to a conversation question is great for that too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like, I'd be happy to, if anyone has any ideas around the text box. I did consider completely scrapping it, but I actually think it may be valuable for someone who has a very bespoke complaint or reason they're canceling, and we'll end up missing it. So I do keep it in for that reason.
Great. Thanks so much, Philip. Such a an interesting look at just such a single part of our UI. I love the depth that you covered there. I'm gonna stop recording now.